Welcome to the Tyler Turner Show. It is today's date, December 14th, 2020. If you haven't yet, please subscribe in all our channels, YouTube, Periscope, and iTunes. And if you're on iTunes, please leave a rating and a review. It will help us out tremendously. Visit us at thesportscast.net, also on Twitter at sportscast1. Check us out on our app, the Sportscast, on the iOS App Store. Well, folks, this is heading towards home stretch. There's not much more to say than that. Is heading towards, this is it. This is the conference championships. And then hold on, I'm trying to get my thing straight. After this, the bowl season, college football playoff, and then the national title game, and this crazy COVID year is done. Actually, probably more than likely what will be done maybe on time. I shouldn't say that yet. I don't know. Probably be done on time. It's obviously cancellations due to COVID outbreaks have been just monumental over the last month. I think it was at the beginning, there was definitely some people said, it's not going to make it. And a lot of people kept on saying it wasn't going to make it. Especially anyone that choose to cancel immediately. But then it kind of turned around, and I thought end of September through October it was perfectly fine. That's probably what allowed the Big Ten, Pac-12, Mountain West, those conferences to get back. But then once they started, it was downhill. I believe, obviously, Big Ten, Pac-12 guy, Big Ten has had, let's do this right off the top of my head, 10 cancellations. The Big Ten did reschedule. So against 10 cancellations, they've had no reschedules. So they lost 10 games due to COVID reasons. And then the Pac-12 has had 13 cancellations. They had 2 conference reschedules, a non-conference game that they've scheduled, and they also, even this week, and I'm going to get into it, but basically Washington is not allowed to play in the championship game, so the backup runner-up in the conference, Oregon, is going to play against USC, so that, I guess, is that replacement, but that knocks out Colorado, who's going to play Oregon for, third place game or whatever the Pac-12 is doing. So Colorado loses the game. So then I guess it's half a game. So and then Colorado got that half a game in early in the year when they got to play the non-conference game against San Diego State. So basically, Pac-12 is rescheduled. Well, 2 full games, 2 half games equals 3 full games. So 3. So they get 13 cancellations, 3 reschedules, I guess, and then just it'll be 10 cancellations for the Big Ten. Hopefully they don't have any. I haven't heard anything so far. I don't know. I know there's been a cancellation for SEC at another one. I think some other conferences have had a couple. Like Pac-12, like I said, had the Cal-Arizona game along with Washington had to be replaced by Oregon. And then Colorado ended up without an opponent. So 3 teams didn't have an opponent. So and the Big Ten and especially the Pac-12 started later, and I think it just got really hard for them to be able to finish off the season. I guess I'll first look at the Big Ten. I'll touch on them a little bit, and then I'll move into the Pac-12, and then I'll probably touch on I'm going to touch on first who I think is going to be the college football playoff teams, the 4 teams. Obviously, there's also a lot going on in college football right now, a lot of coaching openings I've been following very closely. The opening at Auburn, Gus Malzahn was fired. My team, Mario Cristobal, the coach has actually been linked pretty significantly with the job. I'm not going to go into it much. I don't think Mario Cristobal takes the job. I don't know if he gets offered a job. I'm skeptical that he's going to be the first option for a couple of reasons. And I like a lot of things about Mario. I like a lot that he's done at Oregon. I think he's a terrific recruiter. I think he's a very good man. I think he's run a strong program, and I think his team has played hard for him. But If I was Auburn, would that be my first choice? No. The reason why is, okay, so he's a good recruiter. That's his number one thing. He's a great recruiter, and that's why he got the job at Oregon as an interim coach. He got promoted, was because of his recruiting acumen. But as an actual coach, they have lost this year 2 games to 2 teams that have a combined record of 3-7, and those 2 teams, Oregon State and Cal, were not talented teams and should not have beaten Oregon. I know Oregon's a young team. I know that they've lost a lot of people, but Oregon still has immensely more talent. When I predicted Oregon to go 6-0 in the preseason, it was based upon the fact that I felt like Oregon, just based on their talent on the roster, I have them in my baseline formula. They've been the 14th most talented roster in America, but in the Pac-12, second to only the team they play this week, USC. And I actually really thought that USC was the only team that really had the guys that I could say that could really just athletically be better than Oregon. So then if you're losing to guys, to a team that's not as good, why are you losing to them? And this happened tomorrow. I mean, his first game ever against Boise State, it was his first game ever, and obviously circumstances where the head coach left, but they lost to a Boise State team that shouldn't have weren't as good talented. The next year, in 2018, he lost to Arizona by like almost 30 points. Yeah, Arizona was not a good team. They weren't even a bowl team. They lost to and they won a couple other games over teams that weren't very good, barely. But they won. But then last year, they lost to Arizona State. Arizona State wasn't as good. If they would have won that game, they made the college football playoff probably. But they lost. And then this year, they've lost a couple games. And then there's been other games along the line last year, the year before, and this year that I just think the roster wasn't as good as Oregon's, and yet the game was either way closer than it probably should have been, or they lost. And when you're going to the SEC West, if you're going to be the head coach of Auburn, first of all, that's a very high-stress job. The fan base is pretty insufferable and hard to please. And third, and perhaps most important, is you are not the best team in your own state. The best team in that state is the Alabama Crimson Tide. The best team in college football is the Alabama Crimson Tide. They've won 5 national titles in the last 11 years. And then in their same division, you have LSU, who's won 3 national titles this century and just had the best team in college football last year. And you know, also in your division, Texas A&M, who's playing pretty good, who's had top 10 classes last 2 years, and is borderline college football playoff team this year. Enough stuff happens this year; they might make the playoff. And then you know who's in the other division, who you have to play every year because the Auburn and Georgia play every year? Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia Bulldogs is one of the best rosters in college football. They haven't quite gotten there, but they were the runner-up for the national title a couple years ago. That's who you're competing with. You being a great recruiter is awesome, but are you really going to consistently out-recruit LSU? Are you consistently out-recruit Alabama? Are you going to consistently out-recruit Georgia? I don't know. I think that'd be tough. So then you want a coach at Auburn that, you know what, maybe you won't always out-recruit him, but you know what? He knows how to get those pieces in the right place and get the most out of those guys that he has on that roster, able to scheme. If I were Auburn, I would get the best damn coach you could. The guy who you know is a better coach on basically a schematic level than Ed Orgeron, Nick Saban. And remember, Saban is one of the best staffs in college football. So you not only that with going on with the talent. LSU had a staff turnover, obviously, that hurt them. Georgia has struggled offensively, but defensively, obviously, the athletes and just Smart's a great defensive mind. So you're dealing with very good coaches, and you're dealing with immense talent. You need to see who has maybe not had as good a roster and has had optimal results. I can think of several people. Well, I shouldn't say several. That's not accurate. Think of a few. Could think of a guy who's playing for the Big 12 title. He's probably going to have the number 6 ranked team in the country, who, if enough things happen, might have a college football playoff team, who I think is one of the best coaches in college football, and that's Matt Campbell, Ames, Iowa. 3 hours that way, 3 hours on 35W heading south. Yeah, he's a really good coach. No, I don't know if he'll take Auburn. I have a feeling he's a Midwest guy. He might wait for Notre Dame or something to open up. I don't know. He's a really good coach. Luke Fickell has done a tremendous job at Cincinnati. He's undefeated. He has a top 10 team right now. Last year, he had a couple losses, played for the AAC conference title. The year before that, he was, I believe, a top 25 team. I mean, he's been very good at Ohio State. I mean, sorry, he actually was a coach at Ohio State. He was an interim coach once. But just think of who is getting the most out of Hugh Freeze, my alma mater, Liberty University. FCS school only 3 years ago, went up to FBS, hired Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze, a couple years later, has them 9-1 with 2 victories over ACC teams and barely lost to the third one, North Carolina State, who's a good team, 7-3. The guy at Caldwell at Coastal Carolina. I just think Asani Saraki, I can't say his name. So the guy from BYU, who has won a lot of games over teams with pretty good talent. USC last year. Obviously, they're good this year. They had almost top 10 team until they lost to Coastal Carolina, but beat USC last year. They beat Tennessee last year in Tennessee. I'm just thinking of coaches that, man, they have taken rosters that aren't on that next level on a baseline level. They don't get those 4- or 5-star guys. They maybe have mostly 3 stars, and they're beating teams that are more talented. And you see coaches doing that and getting those guys to play consistently at a level better than what they should be. I'm not sure I think off the top of my head. I understand Mario's get pushed out there, and he is a crazy good recruiter, and that is a lot. Talent acquisition is such an important part. I think he's a good culture guy. I think he's a guy that people like, people that are gravitated to. I like Mario Cristobal. I just think but for him to go to Auburn, and then for him, let's talk about him personally. I said all about your second fiddle in Alabama. You're going to a place that has LSU, Georgia, also Texas A&M in your own division. The job security is not great. Look, they fired Gus Malzahn. Malzahn's had winning years. I think every single year he's been there. He's competed for SEC West. He's won the SEC West 2 times. He's 3-5 against Alabama. They fired Malzahn. They fired Gene Chizik 2 years after he won a national title. They fired Tommy Tuberville after he led them to a 13-0 Rose Bowl win. Probably could have been a national champion. Today's they might have won it. Back when they had a Cadillac Williams and Brown. Jason Campbell. At Oregon, he has the best facilities in the entire country, definitely in the Pac-12. Oregon's only real rival for talent acquisition is USC. Oregon's first or second pretty much every year. Have definitely been since Mario's been there. They're probably going to have the 3rd straight #1 recruiting class in the conference. They have a pretty tough North Division, Stanford and Washington, but as long as he gets good coaches in there and keeps them building up talent, I think they consistently can win the North. He's playing for his 2nd straight in the weirdest way, but whatever. Weird COVID backing it in, but he could win his 2nd straight Pac-12 title. And there's pressure, but he's not on the hot seat. And it'd probably take several pretty bad years where, like, let's say he lands his 3rd straight #1 class, and you're like going in with high expectations, and he comes out and like this year has been a weird year, COVID. The postponement of the season, he had a bunch of players opt out, several of his best players. So maybe the fact that maybe they do lose USC, maybe they only end up 3-3, but we understand all that this team's been through. Now next year, if he comes back with what I think will on paper be the best roster, but for sure in the Pac-12, no one will be better, including USC. And then he ends up 7-5 or something. Then people will start being like, oh, he needs to win with this talent he got. But it's not like Auburn. If you did that, if you went 3-3 and then 8-5, they fired Malzahn on a stinking COVID year during the middle of the pandemic. He was 6-4. He lost a ton on defense, but he's not recruiting quite well enough. He's kind of, I think people feel he's reached a ceiling, and they just want to do something, try something better, try to achieve at a higher level. They have really high expectations at Auburn. They did win the national title under Cam Newton. They did play for a national title under Gus Malzahn. They have had good teams. Auburn, since I've been alive and stuff, all college football in the 1990s, they had, probation year, but they were like undefeated. And then like 6-7 years later, they under Tuberville, they were undefeated, number 3 team. They didn't get to play for the national title. It ended up being Oklahoma versus USC, but they had a national title level team. Then 6-7 years later, Cam Newton, they win the national title, actually beat Oregon. And then like 5 years after that, they play for the national title against Florida State. We're winning the game. Could have possibly been their second national title in the century, and then they lost. But they have the ability to play for national titles. They have the ability to win the SEC. But they still are competing against Alabama, who's won 5 in the last 11 years. They have LSU, who's won 3 national titles, just won one. Texas A&M hasn't been as good as Auburn, but Texas A&M does have resources, does have money, does have Jimbo Fisher, who won a national title over Auburn at Florida State, and he has them almost in the playoff this year. They're like right there. And then you got Georgia, who played for a national title a couple of years ago, who has one of the best rosters in college football. And you've got Florida in the same conference, just a lot more. Oregon, I'm looking at USC, and USC hasn't been that great. And then you get Washington, who is a good team here and there. But as a whole, Oregon has been the best team, even before Mario, in the Pac-12 over the last 10 years. USC got their stuff together. USC has the ability, the blue blood. They've won several national titles in their history. But over the last 11 years, 12 years, they've only won one Pac-12 title. They haven't been that good because Lane Kiffin disaster. Well, first probation under Carroll, then the Lane Kiffin disaster, and then the Steve Sarkisian disaster. And Clay Helton was just not a very good hire. So their program hasn't necessarily been on the best trajectory, and it's really influenced their success level. But USC still USC as far as just being like one of the big blue bloods in the history of college football. You go back to O.J. Simpson and Marcus Allen and White and Lindell White, whatever White, I forgot his name, Reggie Bush, Matt Weinhardt, Lindell White played there. They've had just a lot of prestigious names. They've won national titles under Pete Carroll, John Robinson, and before him. So there is but when it comes to the last 12 years or so in the Pac-12, Oregon won 5 Pac-12 titles. They played for 2 national titles. They've had 6 top 10 finishes. I think 5. Sorry, probably had 7, 8 top 10. They've had 5 or 6 top 5 finishes, including last year. So that's as good as you're going to get in the Pac-12, and the conference is not very good. Oregon is probably the best job, along with USC, and Oregon's been better in recent memory. Auburn, it's not. Even though I said those good things, it's not as good as Alabama. It's not as good as LSU. I still would say Georgia right now is probably a better job. They played for a national title. They've won an SEC title before it. You even got Florida, who's won more national titles than Auburn this century. They've won. I mean, this is the toughest conference, and yet this is a job that fired Tommy Tuberville, fired Gene Chizik, that fired Gus Malzahn. So you're playing a tough conference. You have to win at a high level. You can, but then you might get fired if you don't achieve that level. I don't know if he wants that. I don't know. He can play. He can be the best in his conference and probably he could make in the next 5-6 years a couple college football playoffs. I don't know if he would win national title. I would say probably not. But he could be in the college football playoff. And at Auburn, he might not. For the simple reason that Alabama's better, LSU's better. I mean, it's just as simple as that. We'll see. So I digress. I have to get into the Big Ten. No. Last week, don't have a whole lot to say. I watched See what games specifically I want to touch on. December 12th. Okay. Last week I didn't watch a lot of Big Ten, I'll be honest. Saw a little bit of Minnesota, Nebraska. That was a good victory for Minnesota. They were down supposedly 30-some student athletes due to COVID restrictions. They have been hit hard by COVID. My state, where I'm from, Minnesota, has been. And PJ Fleck got them ready and beat Nebraska. Honestly, I don't know what to say about Nebraska. That was my childhood team, and I don't know what to say about them. They lose so many games that I'd go in and thought that Minnesota was down all those guys, and I'm like, man, I can't believe Minnesota's playing. It's awesome. What a job by PJ Fleck to just get them out there. But I'm like, I don't think they're going to win. They win. And a couple weeks ago, it's Illinois. I'm like, Illinois, their coach is on the hot seat, Lovie Smith, who is now fired. I'm like, I think Nebraska will win this one. Nope, they get their butts kicked. They have a couple of good games here and there. But other than that, 4-8 his first year after an 0-6 start. 5-7 his second year. Just get blown out by teams like Ohio State. And then this year, I believe is 2-5, right? If I'm correct. And then they play this week against who Nebraska plays against 17th. Rutgers on Friday night. It's just, and they might not win that. I don't know if they will. Rutgers is 3-5. Rutgers has looked much better under Greg Schiano, who's a very good coach who Tennessee should have hired. Their fan base didn't hire him, which is crazy because look how they've done under Jeremy Pruitt. They're getting their just desserts. It's crazy how karma works in life. But I don't know. I'm just at one of those points with Nebraska that the quarterbacks have been inconsistent. The offense has not been what I thought it was. Actually, the defense has been better than this year. If they had a better offense that they could actually capitalize more on, actually, I think more consistent defensive play. Not so like great defense, but better defense. A defense that is overall given up less yards, that's not given as many explosive plays, that has just been a little more efficient. But the offense under Frost, who's the offensive coordinator at Oregon, who went to UCF with McKenzie Milton, who's now at Florida State, by the way, and it was a great offensive mind, and people respected him so much for all he was able to do. And I'm just not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. I don't. First of all, they're not a great team. He's recruited pretty well, but the problem is, that's another thing. He has had so many transfers. The first class he came in, which is kind of like your initial class where you get hired, like, you got hired after his last game at UCF in December, took the Nebraska job, and then you end up having to close on the class. Early signing day was end of December, and then actually early signing day, we're going to talk about recruiting a little bit, is in 2 days. So Wednesday, basically it's Monday night, Wednesday morning, your ops people are signing those national letters of intent and getting their college going. So his initial class, you have transfers. He lost a lot of guys. A lot of guys transferred. A couple guys got kicked out of the program. But then last year's class had several guys transfers. This year's class, which was the top 20 class, he's had several guys, especially high-end guys. I think he's lost four, maybe 5 blue chip guys that he signed off this last class that have already transferred out. So the guys aren't sticking around. So it's basically not able to keep these guys he's signing. The team is just, the offense is not getting better. He first played Adrian Martinez. Was good, pretty good as a freshman, was not good, and got injured as a sophomore, has been inconsistent as a junior. Played McCaffrey a little bit. I didn't think McCaffrey was that great upgrade. I don't know if McCaffrey's hurt because I know Martinez is back in. I'd have to look into it more. But I don't know about Nebraska. It's tough. It's just, they're going to have a long leash with him. That was their guy. He was the hottest candidate. He could have gone to Florida. He could have gone to UCLA. He could have, an Oregon job ended up opening up. He probably would have been a candidate there. Nebraska wanted him. He went home, and after 3 years, I'm not going to lie, it ain't been pretty. It's not been pretty for Scott Frost. Can he turn it around? He's recruiting decent. Another class is probably around that 20 range, but I don't know. And I really don't know. If you were to ask me right now, I'm skeptical. After 1 year, I'm like, he just doesn't have the talent. He needs to get his players in place. After a second year, I'm like, oh, I thought they'd upgrade a little bit more. I remember people were talking about them as a dark horse in the West. And then by the third year, I'm like, they're the same darn team they were the first year. He has gotten his players, and a lot of the guys that he's gotten to come in have transferred out. What is wrong with Nebraska? They have better people still, even with guys transferring out, than the other teams in the West, than Purdue, than Illinois, than Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a little closer, but then definitely than Iowa, than Northwestern. He's not beating those teams. He's not beating them. Not beating them at all. Not even that competitive in a lot of games. So, I don't know. I'm a little worried about the Scott Frost era. I hope he can turn it around. He'll get 5 years. He could go 5-7 next year, and the next year 4-8. And by that fifth year at 4-8, if it's his fifth straight losing season, he might get fired. He'll get 5 years. I'm telling you, if he wasn't Scott Frost, if he wasn't a hot coach, his first 3 years, as of right now, he's 4-8, 5-7. It's 2-5. So the best he's going to end up is 3-5. Mike Riley's first 3 years, 6-7, 9-4, 5-7. There's no. He had one winning year. Even his first year, he made a bowl game. Just saying. I'm just not seeing that much improvement. They got rid of Bo Pelini for being 9-2 too much. Scott Frost ain't 9-2. He isn't even 6-6. So I hope he turns it around. Always am a Nebraska fan at heart. Purdue and Indiana. Really, and Jeff Brom's another one. I thought a lot more what he was going to do. I thought he was going to do a lot more at Purdue than he has. They are once again, I'm not looking at the record specifically, but I believe they're like 3-4 maybe. If they win, they would be bowl eligible, but I don't think they beat Indiana. I think Indiana makes the Fiesta Bowl if they win. I think they will be in the Fiesta Bowl. I believe 7-1. They'll definitely probably be in the top 12 in the College Bowl playoff. I think there's a decent chance they land in the Fiesta Bowl and probably play the Pac-12 recipient, Oregon or USC. So it's been a good year. Tom Allen's a good coach. Tom Allen, Auburn. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of people who win with. I'm trying to think of people. I know I'm being funny about it, but I'm trying to be people that with less talent are beating teams with better talent. They keep on going back and always getting like quote unquote good recruiters. And I'm telling you, when you're the fourth best team, I don't necessarily think great recruiter is what great recruiter is if you're one of the best teams. And you can get all those best players. And you're like, oh, maybe you're not an aficionado of the offense or defensive scheme, and you can hire really good coordinators a la Dabo Swinney. Ryan Day's great offensive mind. So that's not a good example, but so is like Lincoln Riley. But I'm just thinking of a coach that can, Dabo Swinney, it was never a coordinator, but he got great offensive coordinators around him, Tony Elliott and Scott and Brett Venables, the defensive coordinator, and then he just is the face of the CEO and the face of the program and does the interviews, and that's what he does. And that kind of guy can be a great recruiter and a great culture guy if you're able to get better people than the rest of your conference. You're not Clemson, you're not Oregon, and the thing is Auburn gets good people, but they're in a very, very tough conference. That's what I want to really put an onus on. It's not that Auburn does not get good people. It's the fact that their conference, they are the equivalent of, do an equivalence of their roster. They currently have the number 15 most talented roster in the country, which, put it up, I have my formula here, my team talent formula, takes the baseline, basically the highest rated players get the most points. I'll probably change it up this year. Third years, I'm going to do it. I usually change it up every year. Basically, I give highest totals to the highest rated players per their 247 composite rating. Highest rated players get the most points, and it descends. Basically, if you're lower rated player, you get very few points. I also add in the class average. So your average per player was 90.97 for your class. I add that into the score. So anyways, according to my data, Auburn is the 15th most talented roster. Well, in the SEC, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, LSU, Texas A&M, Tennessee, all have more talented rosters, but far as baseline this year than Auburn. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, there's been years where they're better than A&M, they're better than Tennessee, but you normally are better than Florida, LSU, Georgia, and Alabama. So equivalent to that, let's say in the Big Ten, would be like they're the equivalent of Nebraska. Now, Auburn has better talent than Nebraska, but equivalent from the Nebraska has the 4th most talented. Actually, if you're going to go by directly mine, it'd be Wisconsin this year. Anyways. So I'm looking at like Nebraska or Wisconsin. In the Pac-12, it would be like Arizona State, who has 26, 27, 28, 29, 30th most talented roster, but they have the 4th best in the Pac-12. In the ACC, it would be like North Carolina, who Mac Brown's doing a good job there, by the way. That was a really good hire. So you understand what I'm saying? So North Carolina had Mac Brown. Mac Brown is a good coach. He's a proven, really good coach. He can recruit, but he also knows how to run an organization. He obviously won a national title. He had a very successful first run at North Carolina. That's a good hire. Wisconsin, use them. Paul Chryst is a good coach. He's a good organizational coach. He knows how to utilize the talent and the culture that he has in place. Arizona State, I think Herm Edwards is doing a solid job. They've had a tough year this year because of the COVID. They've only got 3 games in, but I think he's done a better than average job. He was 8-5 last year. I think he was similar to that the year before. And so now, would they be happy with the results of Arizona State? They might be happy with Wisconsin, like results at Auburn, but probably not North Carolina and Arizona State, but that's comparable. They haven't had his talent. So even if they get their talent, so let's say they get their talent better, they're maybe top 4. They're still not the best. So you need a coach that you know can be able to get over the hump on a yearly basis over Georgia, Alabama, LSU by just being being able to utilize that talent he has. And you have to think that guy's a sure thing. You have to trust that guy. He can do it. And that's where we're going. Tom Allen, it's Matt Campbell, Fickle, right? I mean, am I missing something? You can't just harbor on someone who's a great recruiter. And I love Mario, but I don't think Mario would have Indiana's record. Mario would probably not be that good at Indiana. He would not be very good at Iowa State. Iowa State would not be playing for a Big 12 title if Mario Cristobal as a coach. He would get better. At the same time, he even probably at Iowa State didn't have the best talent that they've ever had because he is really that good a recruiter. And that is an important piece. Anyways, I'm digressing. I don't know. I'm really stuck on that because it's really going on in the Oregon sphere right now. Anyways, this week, what do I think? I went through Nebraska, Rutgers, Purdue, Indiana, Ohio State, Northwestern, Big Ten Championship. It's at noon on Fox. Ohio State obviously they ended up going back and redoing what their requirements were, which I agreed with. Their argument was that they would have won the tiebreaker over Indiana due to head-to-head, and that's true. They would have. They did. They won the head-to-head, so therefore they should have been the champion, and I actually agreed with that. They've only played 5 games, I believe, Ohio State. I do think more than anything, I think just the lack of repetition, the lack of just, you're playing 5-6 games. You're going to be healthier, I guess, but, you haven't played Alabama's 10, Notre Dame's 10-11, Clemson's 10-11. So when let's say I think they beat Northwestern, I really do. I'm going to just pick them in that game. I might as well pick all these games. I'm going to take Rutgers in the Nebraska game. I'm going to take Indiana in the Purdue game. And then I'm going to take Ohio State to win the Big Ten championship. And I do think that's enough to get them to the playoff. But I think that Ohio State will maybe just not be clicking at the same level that, let's say, I personally think that Clemson beats Notre Dame. I think that makes Notre Dame I know people will say, well, they should be a third, but I think they will not want to reschedule Clemson versus Notre Dame again. So I think they'll make the 4th seed be Notre Dame, and then Notre Dame would play Alabama, and Ohio State would play Clemson. And I just think Clemson playing that many more games, it just puts them at a disadvantage as of right now. And that's the 4 teams. That's why I think my playoff is, just to cut to the chase. I think chaos could happen, but I don't think it will. I think I would pick Clemson as of right now because I just think they've played more games. I think they should be clicking at a higher level than Ohio State. And I think some of that just lack of overall games, not really played great competition either. I mean, Indiana was a good team, but Northwestern will be a pretty good team, but then all the other victories are over below 500 teams: Michigan State, Penn State, Nebraska, and Rutgers. All those teams are below 500 teams. So I don't think their schedule's been that tough. In the one game that they did play against a better team, 42-35, and they really struggled in that second half, especially defensively. They're going to probably struggle against Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, the best quarterback possibly in college football, and maybe the best running back, and a good defense that could force some turnovers. Indiana forced turnovers for Fields. I think it's going to be tough. I just don't know if I would take Ohio State to win that game, and I don't think I'd take them to win the national title. They do have the talent, though, so that needs to be brought up. Minnesota versus Wisconsin. I'm so impressed with Minnesota, what they did. I don't know how many of those guys are back. Maybe they're going to try to make it happen again. Wisconsin, the whole COVID situation, which knocked them out a couple of weeks, they just never seem to come back. I just haven't thought. They look good against the first 2 games of the season, and then they've lost 3 in a row. And I just don't think they're a very good team at this point. They don't have a very good offense. Pretty good defense as always. I would still probably take Wisconsin because I just don't think Minnesota, with all the struggles, and they've had a couple guys opt out too, like Rashad Bateman. But I think I'd take Wisconsin in that game. Illinois at Penn State. Illinois' coach got fired. I hope they're playing this game. Penn State, actually, I'll give it to James Franklin. James Franklin, I would actually consider kind of like Cristobal. I think he's a really, really good recruiter, really good culture guy. I have been a little hard of him. I think he's lost a lot of games to teams that I just didn't think were very good in his time. And I think he's also sometimes made some decisions in games that I was like, really? And so sometimes of his management during the game, sometimes of his adjustments to teams and being, I guess, outplayed by lesser competition, I've had a problem with. I think he's good at talent acquisition. And I think he's an overall good culture guy. But I appreciate that his team was dead in water, 0-5. Guys opting out like Micah Parsons, Pat Fryermuth, losing Journey Brown this season, losing Noah Kane this season. I'm like, they're going to go 0-8. They've checked out. Well, they checked back in. They've won 3 in a row. And I really do think they beat Illinois because I think Illinois is probably, a new coach. You never know, though. Never know. But that's why I picked Michigan versus Iowa. You know what I'm going to say. It ain't about Michigan, it's about Iowa. I had a feeling when they went through all that offseason stuff and their strength coach, Sean Doyle, I believe his name, had where he was possibly discriminating and he ended up getting fired, and then you get ex-players trying to sue. Kirk had a petition to Coach Ferentz get fired, and there was a suit against Iowa Athletics, and I'm like, Iowa, oh my gosh. And they came in and they lost the first 2 games. They were close games, but they lost them. I'm like, I don't know. But, I was like, Kirk Ferentz is a damn good coach. And he is. They've won 6 games. They're playing really good defense. They're playing very efficient offense. They beat Wisconsin pretty easily. They have won pretty much all their games recently pretty easily. I think they'll beat Michigan, especially how Michigan's looked this year. And with the COVID issues and being off, I got Iowa. And honestly, if it wasn't for Indiana, if Indiana gets upset, Iowa could make the Fiesta Bowl. They could be the New Year's Six representative, not Indiana. But I think Indiana wins that game, and I think Indiana, because they only lost 1 game, and that was to Iowa State too. So that's fair. Because Indiana's impressive too. Michigan State versus Maryland. I wish that was the game. I wish that was Indiana versus Iowa. I don't know why they didn't schedule that. Anyways, Michigan State at Maryland. I don't know. Maryland, I guess. No, I don't have any more to say about the Big Ten. It's been an interesting year for the Big Ten as a whole. I don't think a lot of teams have been played great. Props to Ohio State. Best team. We knew it all along. They're going to be there. I think very good job by Northwestern, very good job by Indiana, and a very good job by Iowa. I'm impressed with those 3 teams, how they handled the pandemic. And when you look at the coaches, you got Pat Fitzgerald, you got Kirk Ferentz, and you got Tom Allen. And I think those are 3 of the better coaches. They can really just get it done from where they're at. I don't think they'd ever leave to Auburn, but those 2 guys can coach. They know how to utilize talent on their roster. They know how to do it. Okay, anyways, I'm going to go to Pac-12 now, and the big thing about Pac-12 is it's a fun conference. That's all I'm going to say. Okay, well, oh my goodness. Where do I start? First of all, several teams barely got any games in. Arizona State has played 3 games, Cal 4, Washington 4, Utah 4. Goes on and on. List goes on and on. But they're going to conclude the season in an unorthodox way. And now it's in Washington versus USC, Pac-12 Championship. There's a little bit of controversy. Washington didn't play their last game against Oregon due to COVID outbreak. The winner was going to represent the North. They just don't play, so then they get to go to the conference championship. Well, as life turns out, Washington ends up having to not be able to play this week. The replacement, Oregon. The North, honestly, has been fun to watch to a certain extent because it's been pretty close. You got 3-1 Washington, 3-2 Oregon, 3-2 Stanford, 2-4 Oregon State, 1-3 Cal, and then the only 3 games for also 1-2 Washington State. But the games are all pretty good. The games have been pretty close, pretty highly contested. If you were to ask me who I think the best team in the North is, my answer would be, I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea. I saw them all play. I watched more Pac-12 probably than any other conference. I have no idea who I'd say the best team is. Talent, you have to probably go with Oregon and Washington. Baseline, it's definitely that. And still, the explosive talent that Oregon has, especially at the running back wide receiver position, is probably best in the North. I have liked how Stanford looked later in the year. Their offensive line is pretty good. Davis Mills is a solid quarterback. They have some good wide receivers like Simi Yafuku, Michael Wilson, Connor Wennington. I like Jones, the running back, Pete, the running back. I kind of like that offense. Like, they were very efficient, and they were very efficient against Washington. Weren't as much against Oregon State, which is a little odd. But defensively, Stanford, they look better as the year went on. I still saw some holes. Yeah, Oregon had runs for a couple turnovers. Oregon was scoring at will on them. Oregon really looked good offensively, which was very odd. When I looked at Oregon, Oregon the first couple weeks turned the ball over, but really just looked great offensively. Very efficient. This was like the best offense that I saw in the Pac-12. The last couple weeks, man, that really was not the case. They had some moments against UCLA. They did have some moments against Oregon State, especially in the first half. But Cal, they hardly had anything. They really did very little offensively, and it was pretty disappointing. Defensively, I've not been really impressed with Oregon the whole year. Actually, the best game Oregon looked defensively was last game. If I were to pick, so I have to pick the USC-Oregon game. So I kind of gave you what I think, and obviously Oregon's my team, and that's the one who I talk about the most. I did, like I said, defensively, they had 8 sacks the first 4 games. The last game, they had 4 sacks. They had 16 tackles for loss the first 4 games. The last game, they had 8. I just thought overall they played harder, they played faster. I like the defensive backs made some plays back there. They didn't give up a ton of running yards. I liked how the defense looked. Conversely, the offense, which was the top scoring offense in the conference, led the conference in yards per play. The last game, and I would actually go back to the second half of Oregon State, and even how it was a lot of the game versus UCLA. First of all, turning the ball over too much. They've turned the ball over, I think, 11 times this year. Then just like guys, defense, a lot of pressure on show. Overall, inconsistent running the ball. The last game, guys, I think had a little bit of trouble getting open. Now Kyle Wilcox is a very good defensive coach. He also had some very good D-backs. Cam Bynum was one of the best defensive backs in probably in college football, definitely in the conference. So I understand that the game might have been, they really schemed up and they played him well. But, man, I just didn't like it. I didn't like the second half really against Oregon State either. I thought the offense kind of like there was times that they could have put the game away and they just didn't do anything. And so hopefully they can come up and this week play good. This is a USC defense, which is statistically okay. They give up yards. They're kind of bend not break. They force turnovers. They actually forced a lot of turnovers. They're definitely in the plus range for turnovers. But you can run on them. You can also throw the ball, especially in the middle of the field. The defensive back, the linebackers in particular are not great in coverage. They get after the quarterback, but they're not like super consistent. They get after in spurts. Drake Jackson's a good guy off the edge, but they're not like consistently get off after the quarterback. They have some good defensive backs. The Talanoa Fungus is probably the best safety in the Pac-12. A couple good solid corners, Elijah Griffin, Chris Steele. But I don't think this is a terrific defense. They definitely gave up a lot of yards. They gave them 500-some plus yards to UCLA. They got ran on, and UCLA can run pretty good. So if Oregon can be physical, if Oregon can get downfield and get the run game established, they could go over the top, especially down the middle of the field. Oregon has Hunter Compton, DJ Jones, I think Johnson, Spencer Webb. They have some really good tight ends, and even a guy like Devin Williams, a bigger wide receiver, getting him down the field, getting vertical, especially down the middle of the field. I could see them doing some pretty good things on USC. As far as USC has not ran the ball very good. They have one of the worst running offenses in the Pac-12. Now they always are good passing the ball. They have great wide receivers, Tyler Vaughns, Drake London. I'm on Ross St. Brown. I think it's some of the probably the best wide receiver group. It is the best wide receiver group in the Pac-12. And they protect Slovis pretty good. But running the ball, not very efficient. They are very inconsistent, and I believe their top running back might be out for the game, Bavia Mamapeai. If they can't run, if Oregon can basically say, beat us running, and Oregon can stop the run and basically force them to run and drop back in coverage, because Oregon hasn't been great against the pass, so they're going to have to get some guys back there to cover, and they're going to probably have to try to get the numbers to their advantage, drop 7, probably can't drop 7, but drop 6, 4 or 5 on wide on route. You have an extra guy. You're able to limit the big explosive plays, keep the plays in front of you, which USC will do. They'll just dink and dunk, and then eventually will probably try to get vertical. But if they can force them, USC's offense, I've seen them play every single game this year, and I don't love their offense. They get yards, but they don't run the ball very effectively. Solus will turn the ball over. He also is a little inconsistent with his accuracy. He will hurry stuff and sometimes might try to make plays that maybe just aren't there. So the defense held. Look, if you had told me the first 4 weeks, I'd be like, I don't know, this defense didn't look good at all. Last week they did look better. I don't think it's a very good Cal offense. I still don't trust this defense. I definitely think they're going to give up yards, but if they can force a couple turnovers and they can be stingy in the red zone, maybe they can play like they did against Stanford, or like they did in the second half against Washington State, or like they did against Cal. I could see they can give their offense a chance to win, because I think their offense can run, and if they set up the run, they can get the ball down the field, especially down the middle of the field. I think they can definitely get yards, and they can score. I think it's a pretty close game. I really do. The line's pretty close. It's a 3-point edge for USC, which I would. USC's won their games. Oregon hasn't. But USC has won 3 games in the last minute, literally. I'm not kidding. They beat Arizona State in the last minute, down by 13 with 4 minutes left. They came back and won. They beat Arizona in the last minute, and then they beat UCLA. They actually fell down by a field goal with 50 seconds left, drove down and scored a touchdown with 16 seconds left. Man, they lost that opening game to Arizona State. You're talking about a different year for USC. They've been hanging on kind of by a thread, and they're able to make it to the title game undefeated. The reason why they're not getting playoff love is because they just haven't looked that good. Even their 2 victories that they won by a lot more, Utah and Washington State. Utah and Washington State had a combined 10 turnovers. They basically, you remember in the Washington State game that I saw, I think they gave them plus field advantage on like 3 of their first 4 series during the turnovers. So they were working on a short field, and USC to capitalize on. But I don't know. I've not been unbelievably impressed with USC. I haven't been impressed with Oregon, but Oregon can win the Pac-12 title and go to Fiesta Bowl. So that's all you can ask for. As far as the rest of the conference, because the Pac-12 will play the final week. Let's see. The Pac-12 Player of the Weeks. Schedule. Okay. Pac-12 schedule. And then I got to go, guys. Touched on a lot. Pac-12. Pac-12, what's going on? Sorry, guys. Full schedule, score. I'm trying to think of the last week. Okay, last week. So I got Oregon versus USC. I have to pick where tonight. Shoot. Well, my heart's with Oregon, but I haven't liked how they played this year. But the problem is I'm not like someone who's like, oh, I think USC is going to win. I think I don't honestly think that. I'll go with Oregon because this is my team. I don't really have any other reason. I have no faith in that victory. I think it's a 50-50 game. What I like is I think it's the two most talented roster. It is, according to my baseline, it is the two most talented rosters in the Pac-12. So that part of like you probably have the two teams that have the guys that probably have the best on a per man basis, best talent on the roster. So I think Oregon. Washington State versus Utah. I am going to take Utah. I think Utah's actually looked very good. They had a very impressive victory over Colorado. They look pretty good. I ended up losing that game, but I thought they're going to win that game. Washington, props to them, came back at home. But Utah's looking pretty good. They're a 3-2 team, and if they hadn't blown that lead to Washington, they'd be 4-1. And they could have an argument over there in the South. Well, they lost to USC, so they don't really have an argument. But they've looked a lot better than I initially saw them. Stanford versus UCLA. Honestly, both these teams have been a lot more impressive. UCLA has actually been a very good team. They're 3-3. Straight up outplayed USC for most of the game, made some big mistakes, gave up the game-winning touchdown with 16 seconds left. It was kind of a tough loss. They played my Ducks. I thought they outplayed the Ducks a lot of the game. Unfortunately, they made a couple of mistakes in that game that cost them. I'm like, Stanford's looked pretty good. UCLA had a tough loss. I just think that was a tough loss. It's Stanford. It's not going to accept a bowl bid, but I think they'll come out and play a very complete game. I'm going to take Stanford. I just think that loss for UCLA might have taken their sails out. Arizona versus Cal got canceled. So I'm not going to talk on that game. So USC, Oregon, Washington. Oh, last game, Colorado obviously got canceled with Oregon, so Colorado's having to point it. And so the very last game will be at night on Saturday. It's Oregon State versus ASU. Oregon State, unfortunately, has had some injuries, and that's hurt them the last 2 weeks. I just don't think they've been as good. They still had close losses to Utah and Stanford. And, I mean, they beat Oregon. They had very close losses to Washington, Utah, and Stanford. They've not had a bad team. I think Arizona State's pretty good, actually. They should have beaten USC. Straight up should have won that game. And then after 3 weeks off, they had to play a pretty good UCLA team. They didn't win that game, and then they just blew Arizona off the field. I think they come out. I think Arizona State wins that game. So that would make bowl eligible, and it's such a wonky year. I think that'd make 1, 2, 3 from my calculations. Well, Stanford's not going. 3, 4, 5, 6 bowl eligible teams. But then I do not believe that there's only 4 bowl games. So it's pretty much the top 4 teams. So that's interesting because if Oregon lost, Oregon would be 3-3. And I believe with winning records, they would be, by my calculations, 1, 2. Well, they're not going, so I don't count. 1, 2, 3. Okay, there'd be only 3 teams with winning records available to go by my calculations. Well, then Oregon probably be the 4th team. So I was just thinking they might not be able to make a bowl because I think only 4 Pac-12 teams can make a bowl, but it looks as if they'd probably be the 4th team. Or however that works out. I don't even know how they would do that. But anyways, okay, guys, I am done. Look forward to this week. It is National Signing Day, early signing day period. I'm covering the Big Ten and the Pac-12. I probably will go over it next week. That's actually probably what I'll go over along with the bowl matchups. Who exactly signs. In the Big Ten, Ohio State is the number 2 class in the country, by far the best class in the Pac-12. Well, by far the best class in the Big Ten. They have just an amazing class. They might end up with the number 1 class in the country, so look for them. Michigan is currently number 9. I believe they There's some teams behind them that are going to sign some pretty good guys. Michigan might not hang in the top 10, but they're still going to have a top 15 class, which is very good. I think when all is said and done. Wisconsin's in the top 20. They might hang in there. I think Nebraska's in the top 20, 25 range. They normally have a top 25 class. And then I think Penn State is in the top 25. Penn State has had a lot of classes in the top 10 under Franklin. I think this is probably one of his not stronger classes. I still think he's able to get it done and is able to ink a top 25 level class. So that would make you about 5 teams in the Big Ten that make the top 25 in the recruiting rankings. In the Pac-12, Oregon is number 6 right now. There's a couple teams below them that I think are going to land some guys that jump over them, but I still think they have another top 10 class. It'd be Mario Crispal's second top 10. He's had all 4 of his classes in the top 15. 2 of his classes have been number 1 in Pac-12. I think he ends up with the top class in the Big Pac-12, but USC could have a pretty good ending. And USC currently is number 14 class, but USC is crystal ball favorites in the 247 crystal ball and predicted to land probably about the 5-star in Corey Foreman, the top 100 guy in Sierra Wright, a top 100 quarterback in Jackson Dart. And then there's a couple other guys that they are rumored to flip, possibly Rayshawn Davis from LSU is the top 100 guy. If they're able to get all those guys in the boat, flip the one guy, they might end up with a top class in the Pac-12. So it'll be Oregon or USC. I think Cal's in there right now, but Cal I think has a couple guys that might flip. I don't think Washington's on the edge, but they're not really trending for a lot. I could see a very possible scenario where Oregon and USC both end up with top 10 classes and no other team in the Pac-12 even ends up with a top 25 class. Recruiting is just not going that well for most teams in the Pac-12. And Oregon and USC, who are playing for the Pac-12 title, have by far the 2 best classes. And I think moving forward, I think the talent level between those 2 and the rest of the conference is, like right now, they have the 2 most talented rosters. According to my team talent formula, you have you have USC at 12, you have Oregon at 14, then you have like Washington at 19, Stanford at 20. But I think the gap's going to get even bigger. I think Washington and Stanford are probably going to even head more that direction because there's some other teams behind them, like specifically I'm thinking about North Carolina, who's acquiring a lot of talent. So I could see Stanford and Washington maybe not even being in the top 20 next year. And then you will have Oregon, USC be top 10-ish borderline. And so I think the talent gap in the Pac-12 is starting to be a little greater, which I actually like, because a part of the reason why teams like Ohio State and Clemson and Oklahoma, I don't think the Big 12 is that great. I definitely don't think the ACC is that great. Big 10's a little better, just better coaching, better programs. But there's still such a talent gap that they're able to dominate every single year and get into the playoffs. The Pac-12 hasn't had that. The teams haven't been that good. There's too much parity. No one gets in the playoffs. But I think now if you have an Oregon or a USC and they can separate, then you can have 2 really good teams and they can play each other for the title every year, and the winner can possibly make the playoffs if they only lose 1 game. And I think they'll have enough talent with a top 10 roster to compete, be at least on the Oklahoma-ish level. So that's good. I like how, and that's why Mario's good. Mario's good because he gets that talent. Now, I'll go back. Mario can't still he can get top 10 classes, but he still could be losing to Cal. He still could lose to Oregon State. He still could lose to Arizona. He still could be having a loss here and there, like Arizona State. Like, why are you losing to them? That is something he needs to figure out, how he can get his guys to play to the level of their talent on a play-in, play-out basis. Anyways, guys, check out my sportscasts, hit us up on iTunes, and leave a review. All right, have a good day.